Lord Hyeamang from Apple Valley High School in Minnesota. He'll play defensive end for us. You see the speed, you see the change of direction in the body control. Lord was an outstanding wrestler in high school, so he plays with great leverage. You see those skills, good hand strength. You know, all the things that wrestling makes you better at. Has an exceptional burst, gets off blocks well, strong hands, good shed and tackle. And again, it's like some of these other guys, really showed a great transition from speed to power as a pass rusher. But again, here's a guy that can play down inside if we wanted to. Most likely he'll play off the edge. But tremendous hand strength, leverage player, and he'll just get better as he gets more mature. But we're really excited about this group. Big, strong guys, a lot of position flexibility. We'll see where they end up from a size standpoint. You know, these guys that are 235 to 240 could end up being 260, 270 defensive linemen with position flexibility and speed, and that gives us a lot of opportunities to use different schemes and use a bunch of guys and keep them on the field and keep everybody involved. So that's going to add tremendous depth to that group, and we really need to improve in that area, especially in the depth with the high speed offenses that are in our league. Be able to play more than four guys is really important.
Net man number 1, Trey Christensen, St. Paul Johnson, Griffin Thorne, Owatonna. Christensen, St. Paul Johnson,
Hold the arm and work on top. There we go. That's it.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Game Plan Series. I'm your host, Anthony Smalls. Today, we have special guest speaker, Lloyd Hyeamang. I'm hoping I'm saying it correct.
Hyeamang. It's not phonetic at all, so you're good.
Okay, cool. He is a former collegiate athlete who transitioned into science and medicine. He is also a former NFL player as well as Canadian football player. And he's here to give you his feel on how he managed to get through his education as well as transition back into science and medicine. So, Lloyd, please give us your introduction, and then we can get into some Q&A answers.
Sounds great. So first off, my name is Lord Hyeamang. I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. My parents are immigrants from Ghana, so I'm first generation. I have one younger brother. He currently works as a management consultant. I went to Columbia University for undergrad. When I was in undergrad, I was pre-med and psych major. I also played football at Columbia, and while I was playing football, I had the opportunity to go ahead and pursue professional athletics. I had the opportunity based on some scouts coming by, so I went through the whole draft process. I didn't end up getting drafted, but I was an undrafted free agent, which kind of means after all 7 rounds of the draft end, there's a couple players around that teams will just sign without having to use a draft pick. So I did that and bounced around from a couple different training camp and practice squad situations, eventually spending some time up in the Canadian Football League before going ahead and taking care of my MCAT, doing some kind of gap year jobs, and now kind of matriculating to med school. And so I'm currently going into my second year of med school at Rush Medical College in Chicago. That's kind of the short and sweet of it.
Do me a favor, can you tell us a little bit about your professional sports journey? How did you transition from being an NFL player, Canadian football player, and then getting into medical school?
Yeah, so I was a little bit of a late bloomer, to be honest. So if you'd seen me like my freshman year of high school, I was definitely the type of kid you would have thought was going to go to med school, but not I was going to play college football, or especially not any pro football. So high school year, I think I was like in the freshman B team. I had the great opportunity to wrestle at my high school, and they had been national champs, a really good team, and that's kind of where I kind of learned the work ethic of what it takes to be a high level athlete. So between wrestling and football, I ended up kind of getting bigger, faster, stronger until my senior year when I had a few offers. At that point, I was coming into another situation where kind of like the underdogs, I guess. My freshman year, I didn't win a single football game at Columbia University. I think we were the worst college football team at the time. We had 0-20 losing streak over the 2 years. But we had a coaching change, and there was kind of this cultural morale shift. And by the time I finished, we ended up second in the conference, and it was a semi-regular occurrence for scouts to come by, ask about different players, come to look at our film. And so at that point, I kind of known coming in, like, hey, if I can pursue this, I really want to pursue pro football, because it'd become more and more common for folks to take gap years. And I know you can't like go back and play football at 30. Whereas with med school, not that I'm 30 yet or anything like that, but you can definitely come back a few years out. You can go pursue other aspirations and then come back to med school. So the med school thing, I kind of figured out beforehand. It was playing pro ball and being an athlete that kind of I had the opportunity to pursue. And so I just went ahead and pursued it. And I figured it'd be a good story one way or the other, whether I made it or not. And I'm definitely glad that I did.
Great, great. How did your athletic career shape your approach to the challenges and successes that you had in medical school? Like I know that the athletic mindset of we're dedicated to practice, we're dedicated to communication, teamwork. You start to look at your opponents and be able to pick who's the weaker person on the team, who's the most advanced on the team. How did that help you transition in the medical school? Was it an advantage in that way?
I think the biggest thing for me was film study. That's like the best parallel I can draw between academics and athletics. Football, as violent as it looks, it's a really like technical game. The biggest jump that I noticed or change was from high school to college is we have so much more meeting time. They give us statistical reports on the type of plays people would run with certain players on the field, because I play defense. So it's like, they would say, hey, if they're in this set, chances are it's going to be run. It's going to be run to the left, or it's going to be a pass. We would look at film, look at people's tendencies. And so it got to the point where not only was I looking at the opponents to try to find a weakness or figure out what the best route was to approach, but we'd also watch film ourselves. So coaches would grade every play in every practice. They grade every play in every game. And when I say grade, it would basically be like, okay, did you do your job? Did you line up in the right spot? Similar to like a test or a quiz, with the games being like your final exam. And so the mentality was, all right, you have all these little chances to improve, like look at yourself, take constructive criticism, and then work on it. And I've definitely taken that into my personal life. So whether it's an exam score or maybe like some sort of research project, I'm big on reaching out for feedback, because I realize that's the fastest way to get better. It's like you try something, whether it works or it doesn't work, you go to somebody that knows better or that's like an expert in the field that can give you good advice and tell you, hey, you need to do this. And then you get to the point in college and then as an adult where you can objectively look back at your past performance and say, all right, did I do this right? Should I have done something differently? And so by the time you're a junior or senior, the expectation is you can watch your own film, you know where you're supposed to be, you look at it and see what you did wrong and what you should have done better. So that it's not just you have one person with a high expectation of you, but you are keeping yourself to that high expectation. So I think that aspect of self-improvement, being critical of yourself and being open to coaching is the by far, even more than the hard work ethic, because like I know there's some people that don't ever play sports with crazy good work ethic, but that like openness to being coaching, I think it's hard to find in people that don't play sports.
So I have an interesting question. What inspired your start to the journey in medicine, and how did your background in athletics influence it? Because in the past, one of our previous game plan affiliates, they said that they got into science and medicine when they got injured and they saw the care that happened. Was something similar like that to you?
So I'm an outlier in that. Tons of, especially athletes, I'll admit this early. I'm interested in orthopedic surgery. Tons of athletes are interested in orthopedic surgery. They'll be like, oh, I tore my ACL, I broke a bone. I don't have any of those stories. Every team I signed to, they would always ask if I was missing medical records because my injury list was so short. They're like, hey, you don't see any like where your broken bones at, where your surgeries, like, and I was definitely fortunate. Part of it was just because I didn't play ball that long since I'd been a late starter. I didn't start playing till my 8th grade year, and then I went into like a couple years of pro. My biggest push was health equity. So growing up, especially as a child of immigrants, and then my parents, especially when we were younger, just being lower economic status, I saw a disparity between how immigrants and then people outside of the U.S. view the U.S. as a land of milk and honey, great opportunities, everything's perfect there, versus how people are like treated when you don't have the same means or money to pay for things, especially in the healthcare aspect where I don't know, I thought there's something, I'm not gonna say morally wrong, but just something that didn't make sense with uh, things like say like insulin costs, where it's like we have something that can relatively cheaply and effectively treat somebody, but because of how much money they make or what resources they have at their disposal, they're not able to get that. I remember there was a story of one of the congregants in the church that I grew up in. I forget if he was undocumented or not, but he had some blood in his stool for a while. He had been afraid about going to the doctor because he was afraid of the cost and being able to pay for the bill. Down the road, he ended up passing away. And not to say that it could have been prevented had he gone in, but had he gone in, gotten a diagnosis, he definitely would have had a better shot. So when people are making kind of life and death choices over dollars and cents, that was something that I felt like I wanted to be a part of the movement to make healthcare more equitable. So my aspect was more from the health equity space, especially with like immigrant health, to be honest.
Okay. So my next question is, how do you manage, or how do you feel about the transition from the integrity of professional sports, the intensity, the day-to-day grind, to the rigorous demands of now medical school, where it's a different type of journey, it's a different type of dedication, and your mindset to it?
Yeah, I feel like, which is going to be weird to say, but like at least so far, I've felt less stress because, like, if you think about it, especially when you get to the pro level, each week, especially because I wasn't like a top ranked guy. So every week I was like on the chopping block. I was just hoping to make it past cut day. And so when you kind of have like that visceral stress day in and day out, I just got relatively good at like positive ways to deal with that stress. And so I don't know if it's because that time my period was more stressful or because I now have the tools that I already built up. But the transition for me had been relatively smooth, to be honest. On top of that, I took some of my prereqs in the off seasons while I was playing ball. So I didn't feel like I had a long gap between doing undergrad schooling and going to med school. It kind of felt like a smoother transition than I think for some other folks, just because I took a few classes along the way. I took my MCAT while I was still playing in Canada. So I was never too far removed from the academic aspect. And then I had become really good at time management just because it's necessary after being a collegiate athlete, going to becoming a pro athlete and trying to juggle doing some pre-med coursework while doing my off-season workouts. By the time it came to med school, I already had all these skills that made things a lot easier for me.
So, in some of the programs that we kind of have under the Swag Initiative, we have mentorship with different schools and different collegiate athletes. How do you handle the the pressure of knowing you have to do things for class, but then knowing that being a Division I athlete, kind of you feel that pressure to trump your classes or your studies and stuff like that to make sure that you make practice. How do you handle that as a mindset of a player?
So I didn't handle it all that well as an undergraduate student. I just knew in the back of my head, I wanted to do two things that most people don't. So I was going to have to do extra. So I wanted to simultaneously play pro, which is already tough coming from an Ivy League school. Like we're a smaller D1. So it's not the same as going to like Alabama or Georgia or something like that. And on top of that, I wanted to be pre-med, which is already hard on its own without adding being a pre-med athlete. So I remember even my freshman year, there was times where I would be active for a game as a freshman, which was already like an outlier. And I'd come back from the game, like an away game late at night, and then I had to go straight to the library and stay up in the library to finish some sort of paper. And then I'd have our Sunday post-game workout right after. So a lot of it, looking back at it now, I could have planned out or managed better. But in the moment, my thought process was getting to the NFL was the part where I couldn't come back on. So I definitely, which isn't the best way to do it, I definitely slightly prioritized my athletic development over the academics because I knew, okay, I can move a class around here or there, or I can come back and take a class if I don't have room for it. Whereas, once your eligibility is up in college, you don't have like a second chance. You've shown whatever film you can show to the pros. And that's pretty much it. So it took a little bit of like creativity of like me deciding, okay, what do I really want and need to reach these two goals? So for instance, my major, psych, worked out because it covered some of my pre-med stuff. It was relatively flexible and I wasn't going to have any conflicts in my schedule where I would have to miss practice. Whereas some of the guys in my team, if they were in like an engineering type degree or certain other science courses, you're going to have to miss practice. And it comes to the decision, okay, am I going to do this major or am I going to miss practice? Thankfully, I could still do most of my pre-med requirements without missing practice. So it definitely took some some negotiating either with professors, coaches, but as long as I was open, reached out, said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. What does it look like? I have these two goals. What can we make work? There was usually some wiggle because it's like, it's a special situation. Sometimes you can make like special circumstances, special things happen. Like I remember we moved like one of my practices like a little early. Thankfully, it worked out for everybody, but like they moved one, like our Sunday practices a little earlier because I was like, hey, straight up, like, yeah, this thing I have to do Sunday afternoons. Can we move our Sunday post game workout a little earlier? I was like team captain at that time, so I had a little pull. Worked out in the end, but you know, that's not something I would have been able to ask for or do as a freshman.
The benefits of being a star on the team definitely
Yeah,
pay off.
exactly.
See. So the next question I have is, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about transitioning from athletics into a career like medicine?
I think the biggest thing, and it took a while to get over it, there's this knock or the stereotype of like a dumb jock. And it's weird, especially coming from such a great institution as like Columbia University. But even within the campus, sometimes you get that idea of like, okay, the athletes are just here to do X, Y, and Z. They don't really care about school, even though you have to meet like pretty rigorous standards to even get into an institution like Columbia. So I think part of it was like my own internalized thing of like, oh, people think I'm dumb. I have to like show up and show out. I'm definitely at a space now where it's like, okay, I know I'm smart. I believe I'm smart. I'm not really concerned. I just got to do things whatever best way fits. Yeah, now I feel like I got off on a tangent. I'm forgetting where I was going to go with it. What was the original prompt? I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry. So the question was, what's the biggest misconception people might
Oh,
have about transitioning from
yes.
athletics?
Okay. So I guess it's the idea that as an athlete or coming from, I guess another domain where you excel at, you're gonna be less than, or like, okay, you may be really good at sports, but you can't be like that smart, or you can't do both. For some reason, you have this idea that it's tough for people to, and I guess it is in terms of time management, but like, there's no reason that you being a professional basketball player, you being good at golf would intrude on your skills as a physician or being smart enough to go to med school in the same way that you being a really good computer scientist coder would make you not a good biology student. Even though they're two different domains, there's no reason that you should think of yourself as, okay, a dumb jock per se. So I think that was definitely the biggest misconception that either I had or that people would kind of like put on me.
As a former NFL athlete, what are the lessons from sports do you think is most applicable to your current studies and your career in medicine?
So the best story about this is when I was with the training camp with the Los Angeles Rams. And Dominic Sue, what I think I forget it was his first year, second year of the Rams. But I remember like he had everything super dialed in. Like he brought his own lunch. He would take meetings with I think it was with his agent or his manager between practice. So during training camp, we might have like a couple like maybe two practices a day, or we'd have a lift and then a workout. After he changed in the locker room, he'd make a quick call and like schedule whatever event he had at the Nike campus that day. So he did his best to squeeze out every minute of every day. I'm not there yet. I'm starting to get better with my Google Calendar and like, you know, if I'm walking down the hallway, maybe taking an email. But the biggest thing I think is maximizing, like you don't, everybody has the same amount of time, but people don't squeeze out the same amount of stuff in that time window. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson I learned, especially from folks that had multiple things. So as an example, like he does a bunch of real estate investing in Portland. He was like a big Nike athlete, being that he's from Oregon. So he would do a bunch of different events with kids on top of playing on what was going to become like a really good NFL team as a professional. If he can juggle all that stuff, I surely can juggle some class and some research, and then this and the third. So that's definitely the biggest thing I took.
Gotcha. So looking ahead, now that you are in medical school, what are some of the things you aspire to accomplish in the medical field, and how does that passion from sports integrate into your future aspirations?
I think it's a good question. I think my biggest thing is like want to graduate, want to do well at school. I'm definitely leaning towards orthopedic surgery at the moment, but I think I'd definitely be happy in a surgical specialty in general. The best thing that I would be happy about is being able to say like I either was able to like inspire some kids below me or inspire other people to pursue both athletics and medicine if they were already interested in athletics and curious about medicine, but for some reason thought it wouldn't be possible. I think that inspiration aspect for younger generations is a big thing because that's part of the reason I even pursued football along with medicine. Um, and then I guess the second thing would be longer term. I'd love to affect the health equity space in terms of how care is given to specific communities, especially the underserved. So those would be my current like short term goal is like the younger generation coming after me, and then like bigger term would be the health equity space, especially with underserved communities and the care they receive.
Okay, with that being said, let's transition. You're here as a co-founder of Sneakers to Scrub. Can you tell everybody what Sneakers to Scrub is? What's your mission statement? What do you hope to accomplish as a non-for-profit?
Definitely. So Sneakers and Scrubs was co-founded by me and a couple of my classmates in the Chicago area, mostly between Rush Medical College and University of Chicago, Pritzker School of Medicine. The majority of us are former athletes that are now in medicine, and by and large, the majority of our group is young Black men. Now, the biggest thing or inspiration for it was the fact that Black men are like the smallest demographic in medicine. If you look back all the way to the 60s, the percent of Black men in medicine has stayed the same, but our population has increased. So, like as a percentage, we're doing worse off than we were, some 60 years ago. So the goal is, hey, a lot of young Black men play basketball or football. A lot of people our parents' age would say, hey, don't worry about trying to make the league, focus on school, but that's obviously not working in terms of getting the numbers up. So why don't we say, hey, kids, you can do both, you can pursue both, we've done both, and then give them the tools to kind of pursue that. And so I guess our biggest mission or number one mission is kind of to inspire more young Black men to pursue medicine through athletics. And then as we expand and go along, it'll expand into like young Black men and young Black women to the point where we'll probably just look at doing underserved folks in general. But starting with what we know best and where we see the most need, that's definitely the young Black boys.
So your answer spoke to the impact that you hope to have on the young athletes and the community. How far do you expect or hope Sneakers to Scrub to grow, and what is your overall achievement for the not-for-profit?
So it's a little tough to say for sure because, to be a Black man in medicine is already a rare breed. To be an athlete in medicine is a rare breed. To combine the both is like a super, super rare breed. So the biggest thing I'd love is to see some sort of sustainability where, okay, maybe we have a few Black male athletes around in medicine, but just in general, if we're able to spread the mission to either some other campuses or make it a more national effort, where we're able to say, hey, if you're coming into say some sort of D1 school and you're curious about what it would take for you to do medicine, you have resources, mentors, basically a diagram of the steps you need to take because it's pretty rare to do. And so if people don't realize it's possible, they're not going to pursue it. I think big picture, that's what I'd love to see, either more locations, more chapters around the US, or us just being like go-to spot where we're doing virtual webinars or traveling to do different in-person events. I think scalability is like the biggest thing that we could have. And then giving folks the information or while they're early, like telling middle schoolers, hey, this is what you need to do to set yourself up to have the opportunity to pursue med school. Then, if they pursue it or not, that isn't as much of an issue. It's just we want folks to have the skills and to be in a place where they can make that decision for themselves if they want to.
So you just mentioned a second ago health equity. So I wanted to know, what are the unique challenges that you feel you face as a Black man pursuing a career in medicine, and have you had a hard time navigating them?
So I think definitely there's like a perception of, I guess, visually how folks look. It's like an easy example for folks is um, women in medicine. For a while, the assumption is, okay, if you're a woman in medicine, you're a nurse. Similarly, if you're like a Black man in medicine, the assumption may be like, oh, is this like the, I don't know, the custodian or something. There was a book I read, I think Black Man, White Coat, and he had, this was back when he was in Duke Med School, he had been mistaken for a janitor. Thankfully, I haven't had any of those issues pop up just yet, but just walking around, I'm like 6'4", not 300, but I'm a pretty big guy. So walking around, most people wouldn't look at me and assume like, oh, this person's in med school or this person's a physician. So there's that first barrier of like just the physical outward look that you may have some distrust with patients or faculty or people that may have some preconceived notions about you. They have to fight off jump. And then the second aspect is it can be tough at times, depending on the crowd or who you're working with, for some folks to feel like they can trust you, whether they've had a bad experience or whether they just may have some sort of preconceived notions. For the most part, I haven't had too many issues with that, but I've definitely heard stories from both my peers and then from mentors, whether they were called slurs or whether they were, they sat down, they introduced themselves, they're like the resident. And then all of a sudden at the end of their whole explanation and plan summary, the person's like, oh, well, when is the doctor coming in? It's like, I'm the doctor. I just introduced myself as the doctor. I went through your whole chart. I gave you your meds. Like, I'm the guy. But I think the biggest benefit for more diversity or just more presence of Black men in medicine is our community generally has the worst health outcomes. And historically, the research has shown that a lot of times people will get better outcomes by people that look like them, or I can at least communicate with them culturally. So I've had experiences, and as of my classmates, even when we're just shadowing, where we'll have other patients of color in the office see us and just be like so happy or inspired, be like, oh, okay, I'm glad to see you in med school. We need more folks like you, or keep up the good work. There's definitely a sense that being in the doctor's office can already be a scary place. So it's nice for them to have a sense of comfort and somebody knows like the same foods that you eat or the same jokes that you and your family tell or like, the same songs and dances that you guys listen to at birthday parties. And then on top of that, more often than not, folks of color that are physicians are more prone or more likely to work in the areas with the worst outcomes. Like they're more open to saying, all right, cool, I'm gonna work in the South Side, or all right, cool, I'm gonna work in Harlem, or okay, cool, my family's out here anyway, so I'm down to open up an office in this rougher part of town, which isn't always the case across the board. So that's definitely the biggest benefit that I see in diversity, as well as some of the challenges that come with it, especially as a trainee, where you're not always in a position of power to defend yourself per se or have to navigate certain situations.
So with that being said, what are some of the initiatives or changes that you would hope or like to see in medical education to better support underrepresented groups?
So for a while, and I know there's some back and forth about this, but it used to be my favorite example was I want to say the Rooney Rule. It would be for most head coaching positions outside of like certain situations in the NFL, you would have to make sure that you at least interviewed X number of like Black head coaches or X number of diverse coaches. And for the longest time, I don't know how it is now, but for the longest time, Black head coaches had like twice as high as a winning percentage as white head coaches. And so taking that back, logically, for the most part, it had become twice as hard for a Black man to become a head coach. They had to be twice as good, basically, to get a job compared to a white head coach. Now, not all that's over racism. It just comes into, say, connections and who you know. A lot of these things are like who you know and who you're comfortable with and who you're around. But for a good, like, I don't know, 10-ish years, I don't know where it's at now, just by being forced to interview more people that you may not have otherwise, that percentage dropped down. So it's weird to say like those head coaches, quote unquote, got worse, but they came back down to average with their white counterparts, which meant, okay, cool. The standard to get over the hump to make up for quote unquote being Black had been decreased. I love initiatives like that just because you kind of get into shaky territory when people talk about like, okay, different standards, this and that. But if you're able to kind of, I guess, force diversity into the pool, or at least force people to take a serious look at other people that they might not have, then you open up the door for people to kind of shine for themselves. So I guess the biggest thing is, one, making sure people are getting the same opportunities. So if I don't have those connections, if I don't know how it's supposed to go, if I don't know how to get research, if I don't know I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z, how can you expect me to have done that in time to pursue medicine? And so giving people that information, or making sure the system is looking for those folks or recruiting those folks. And the second thing is earlier education in terms of the STEM fields. I think Marcus mentioned this on this podcast, where I think it was like geometry. You have to take geometry by a freshman, with the goal of, by the time you're a senior, you want to have touched or seen calculus, just because math is a really good proxy for people's success in STEM fields. So the earlier we can get to kids the skills that they need to pursue postgraduate careers that take a lot of grit and determination, like medicine, the better off they'll be, and the bigger pool of folks we have to choose from. If we're hitting kids when they're in college or even high school, sometimes it's too late. Whereas middle school, people are still a little more malleable. You have more time to change your views on schools and academics. You have time to instill a growth mindset in them and to tell them, hey, you can do this. It may take a little bit of work, but here's others that have done it like you before. That would be like my big two things. So like getting folks in positions where they know what they need, and then making sure that we're able to educate young folks early enough where they are able to make that choice to pursue medicine and have that skill set to succeed.
Thanks. So I'm gonna ask one more question. I'm gonna throw it to the panel because I feel like I've been hogging as the host, asking all the questions. I want some of the people online to be able to ask a question. So you spoke about the aspect of mentorship. So I want to transition and ask about how important is mentorship? How did mentorship play a role in your journey from athletics to medicine? And did it play a role while you were actually in your collegiate career, trying to balance school and athletics at the same time?
Yeah, I think mentorship is huge, and it's even bigger than I know. And I'm trying to be better about keeping in touch with mentors. But something that I've learned is translates all the way through my career, and even as an attending position, it'll still be a part of my life. I was always, especially because I was a late start with athletics, I was always in the mindset of like, okay, my peers, my coaches, upperclassmen, they all know more than me, so I'll humble myself and ask for whatever advice. So even as a freshman, I was more than willing to ask my other teammates on the B team, like, okay, hey, how do you do this? Or you've been doing this since like middle school. It's my first time. Like, how does it look when I do this? Or like, what do I need to be doing? And so throughout my career, whether it's academics, athletics, I definitely sought out the support and mentorship of folks that I either see doing something better than me, have done something longer than me, or have done what I want to do. A great example, and sometimes I'll even take folks as mentors that maybe don't even realize that they're mentors, or I'll take inspiration from them. So for instance, part of the reason I ended up picking Columbia, I was at a point in my college recruiting where I could pick basically to go to like a decent academic school that was good at football, or like a decent football school that was really good at academics. And Myron Rule at the time had just announced he was leaving the Tennessee Titans to go ahead and go to Florida State University for his medical school. And, you know, I had like known about his story for a bit, and I looked through it, and he'd gone from playing Florida State to like doing a year at, I forget if it was Oxford or Cambridge as like some sort of scholar, before going ahead and going to the draft and playing for the Titans for 2 years. And I think he just graduated from his last year of neurosurgery residency, if I'm not mistaken. But the fact that I saw, okay, this person wanted to do both, he pursued both and did it well, meant I could do the same. And so that same aspect, some of mentorship is even me just looking around to find people that have done something I want to do, just so I can tell myself like, all right, this is possible. I can figure it out. Somebody else did it. He's got 2 arms, 2 legs. I got 2 arms, 2 legs. I can figure it out. As far as the nitty gritty, just along the way, there's some things you don't know what you don't know. So whether it was in the defensive line room as a collegiate athlete, that freshman year, I found an upperclassman that was doing well. He was doing well at football. I don't know what his academics were like, but at least I got the football aspect of things from him. And in the same way, there was folks that I knew like, hey, there's guys on the football team that are pre-med. How do you make it work? When you schedule your classes? So it's as simple as like just checking in, asking questions. Some of those guys now are residents while I'm a medical student. So I reach out to those guys about picking med schools, or you know, what residencies I should start looking at, or what surgical specialties are interesting. So I think as much as it feels awkward at times to reach out to folks or ask somebody to be your mentor or ask them questions, especially in medicine, it's a very, I won't say patriarchal, but it's a very give and take kind of culture where the expectation is, as a med student, you're going to be reaching out to residents and attendings for some help, some advice. So you shouldn't feel bad about it because they did the same thing when they were med students, and so on and so forth. So I'm at the point now where I'm getting it on the back end as well. I'm a med student, and there are pre-meds that reach out to me and ask me questions if they find me on LinkedIn, or high school students that'll see me at an event and ask for questions or advice, look at my phone number. So just as much as I reach out to folks, people reach out to me, and I still reach out to folks that are older, whether it's residents, other med students that I think are like better at something than I am, like maybe it's research, or they have a really good study system. Even to this day, there's definitely peers that I have in med school that I could consider mentors, because I just ask them like, hey, you're juggling a bunch of things. What's your schedule like? What is your study routine like? How do you manage it all? So I think by and large, you still have to put in the work. That's definitely one of the best things you can do to set yourself up, is having a mentor. And I guess the last thing I'll say about mentorship is there's a difference kind of between like the mentor and the sponsor, where it's like, okay, somebody can tap into you, tell you which way to go for this, or help you with decisions, or set you on the right track. But then there's also the idea of sponsors, who are folks that are on your side and can step into or speak into you in rooms that you're not even in, whether that's different opportunities or research opportunities or internships or whatever that may be. And those may not be folks that you touch base with as often as your mentors, but especially as you go along, and I'm realizing now in the pursuit of, orthopedic surgery or any other specialty for that matter, sponsors are a big thing, and that's across the board. So sponsors are similar in the NFL head coach situation, where it's like, all right, if you played for somebody or you coach for somebody and they get a new job somewhere else, they may bring your name up for a new position. That's across the board. People don't know about it as much in medicine, I think, because a lot of folks go into medicine without having had a job or a regular desk job. But if you're in like an office role, or if you've had a boss, or you've gotten past up for promotion, or you've been up for a promotion, the idea of having a mentor and sponsor isn't new. I think sometimes in medicine, we kind of, I guess, make it a little more, maybe people get a little, aren't as well versed with it, just because like that's their first experience dealing with, okay, how important it is to keep up with relationships and make sure that you're staying up to date with people.
Thank you so much. At this moment, I want to try to throw it to the crowd and see if anybody has any questions. Please come off mute and ask a question if there's any.
Well, I'll start. And thank you for taking the time to speak. I'm Reg Miller. I'm the Dean of Research Operations here at Mount Sinai, and one of the director of the SWAG initiative. One of the things you talked about is having mentors. Can you talk to us about parental involvement?
Mm-hmm.
And one, from your perspective, the encouragement that you received from your family, and also as a part of your program, how much are you engaging parents in your initiative?
Awesome. Those are great questions. And I'll just say first on my own parental experience, there's this joke, especially with, I think there's definitely several immigrant cultures I can say this, but at least in the West African community, you kind of have like 4 career options coming out. It's doctor, lawyer, engineer, or like a shame to the family. So it's like off rip, there's a strong push for some sort of professional degree or an academic success. So I think the fact that I never had any sort of qualms, or I had definitely had more doubts about the football career than I did about medicine. It was like, regardless, it's like, okay, cool. If I set my mind to it and I want to do this, I'll definitely be able to do it. And so having somebody speaking that positivity into you off jump is a great way to do things. On top of that, it takes a lot of work to get a kid to the point where they can pursue different STEM degrees. That starts with nurturing their curiosity early, answering questions they have, going to science museums, whatever is age appropriate at the time. I remember I would have these summer workbooks that my dad would get me that were a grade above my age level. So I would do like one of the 3rd grade workbooks. He's like, all right, let me get like a 4th grade workbook for you to go through, and then on to like a 5th grade workbook. So little things like that, I think, make a big difference. But it's the same thing that you see in athletics. Any kid that you see that's gone pro or gone professional, for the most part, either had a parent that was a pretty good athlete, or at least know how to get their child to become a good athlete. I think the kind of gap is, at times, people don't know what it actually takes to become a good student. You think, okay, you sit down, you read, you do your homework, and that'll make you a great student, which honestly isn't always the case. Like people don't always learn how to learn. So just telling a kid to sit down and do their homework isn't always gonna get the results that you're looking for, as opposed to nurturing that curiosity, explaining to them how learning works, getting to the point where they're motivated for their learning. Um, but what's nice with what we do for the most part is the parents that are willing to go take their kid to practice, take them to travel games, take them to youth football league, national tournaments. They're pretty motivated parents anyways. And so it's usually the same folks that are willing to take their kids to all these extracurricular activities that are willing to be invested in their academics as well. So for the most part, one of the things we really like about this athletics, medicine through athletics initiative is we're self-selecting for a pretty motivated group of not only students, because they're used to adversity, winning, losing, going to practice, having to work out, having to be somewhere at a certain time. But their parents are pretty motivated. They're willing to give of themselves to better their children's future. So I think parental involvement is huge, and honestly, it plays a bigger role in many ways than academics. The gap sometimes is them knowing what it takes. If I was a parent today, I would think, okay, all my kid needs to go to med school is to have good grades and good test scores, which doesn't really cut it. You have to do like shadowing, you have to get volunteer experience, you have to be able to write well about your experiences, you have to show that you've been committed to things throughout your time in undergrad, you have to show that you're able to start things, you have to show that you're a leader, you have to have a mentor, you have to have people like write letters of recommendation to you. If I'm a parent and I don't know those things, all I'm concerned about is my students' grades and their test scores, I might be missing some pivotal information. So all that to say is parents are supremely important. I think sometimes the gap is not motivation, at least with our population, since we're generally working more with motivated parents, but the knowledge about what the kid needs to do to get where they want to go. But thank you for that question. That was definitely got my brain rolling.
So follow up, and you've achieved a lot, but talk to us about handling adversity. So I can't imagine everybody you've encountered has been encouraging you to pursue this career path. From coaches, teammates, friends. First of all, give us if you don't mind sharing a story of someone who came at you with an adverse conversation and how you handled that. I think it's important for students to understand that as well.
Got it. So I'll say, at least on the adversity end, some of the greatest adversity I faced was as a pro athlete. So I went from, I think that was like a year span where I was like on 4 or 5 different teams. So first off, didn't get drafted. My first team that I signed to was the Jets, and I was there for the rookie mini camp weekend. My agent gave me the heads up. He's like, hey, this is like a pretty low commitment style signing. Just be on the lookout. Consider this more of a tryout than really being signed. By the end of that weekend, there was like a cornerback they wanted to sign. They had too many D linemen, and so I was out of there. So I went from a lot of fanfare on my campus, people posting like Photoshop things, and then you get a Google alert whenever somebody gets cut or traded or signed to basically within the next weekend. All right, I'm just like a regular student again. Thankfully, the next weekend I had another opportunity to go try out with the Colts, but then I pulled my hamstring. So then I'm back home just rehabbing for a while, not sure really what the future would hold. I went along, more opportunities came and more opportunities went, but I had the perception that, okay, cool, as long as I control what I control, that's all I can really worry. And that was really, especially after getting my second chance, I think it was, I want to say the Seahawks that had signed me after I'd gone back from rehab, where I was like, oh, okay, I can get cut one day, and then another day I can get signed and get cut again. As I stopped putting so much stock in the ebbs and flows or like each little step along the way, I started looking at it longer term, like zooming out. Okay, like at this point, maybe it sucks, maybe it's difficult, but I'm getting better. Me pursuing something, failing, coming back, learning from it, I'm slowly but surely getting better. Just like when I work out and I get sore and it hurts, and then the next day I can do a little more weight, a little more weight, a little more weight. I started thinking about failure in the same way, almost like I was building like a failure muscle on my way to becoming excellent. And so I kind of took that motivation throughout my life. Basically, my perception was there's nothing that I could fail so bad at that I'd be done unless I quit. It wasn't like stupid. I wouldn't do the same thing over if I did it wrong the first time. But I made sure to ask, okay, anytime I got cut or say got a bad test score, okay, let me go back, review it. Let me see what I need to do. why did I not make the cut here? What could I have done better? What advice or input do you have? Which is hard to do in the moment. Like if you're sitting down in a room and somebody's saying like, hey, this dream you've had since you're a little kid, it's over. We don't want you around anymore. It's very hard to take that moment instead of feeling hurt, angry, frustrated, and say, hey, how can I get better from this? But anytime I was cut or had a setback, there would always be these exit interviews. And the first thing I would ask is like, okay, cool. I understand there's not a need for me now. You know, I'm headed out the door. What can I do to improve? What is the difference maker here from me and the other guy you kept? What do I have that I can work on? With the mindset that I know, okay, next time I'm going to be a little bit better. So for the most part, I think a lot of my, that's just the very, very, very fresh in my mind because I definitely experienced a lot of failure throughout my athletic career. But that's one of the places where it's easiest and quickest to see improvement. Yeah, and I think that's honestly, it's the same mindset I've had with academics, which is part of the reason I like curriculums that have more quizzes or tests or homework. So it gives yourselves more, not in a bad way, more chances to reevaluate or grow or learn. It's really more chances to fail, but it's more chances to build that muscle. And so my curriculum currently, we do like a quiz a week and then we have like a midterm and then we finally have our final. And it's nice because I know every time I take a quiz, I can look at what I got wrong, what I got right, see what the professor thinks is important, what they want, what they value, what they want me to know about, and I can incorporate that into my study plan. So yeah, I'm thankfully still at the spot where I view failure positively, but definitely took some work to get there.
Thank you. I just want to just comment on that. So we don't use the F word too much when we talk to students because we don't believe that you only fail when you stop trying.
Exactly.
You know, everything else is just practice along the way. Right. So and that's I mean it's important for young people to appreciate. They get too hung up in this overly worked up about things not going the way they anticipated the first time. Well, that's just part of life, part of the growing experience.
Yeah.
And we're kind of conditioned to think about that in the context of failure, which is nobody wants to fail, but that's not what's happening. So that's an important thing for young people. I see some folks and some names I recognize on the phone. I can call you out, but I prefer if you just ask some questions on your own since you're here, Heaven.
Hi, I did have a question, but I feel like you actually answered it. I wanted to thank you first for taking time to speak with us today, but maybe in a different light, how would you basically, because my question is, how do you continue to like persevere when you do have times of uncertainty or doubts, but I guess in a different way, when there's not really a plan, maybe?
Well, before you answer that question, can't you tell Lord a little bit about yourself as far as your athletic background? If anybody else is an athlete, just so the group understands who we have on the call.
Okay, so my name is Heaven, as I stated, and I'm a cross country athlete. I was D2 at Pace University. And during high school, I also did track, like winter and outdoor track, but long distance is my passion. I've done a marathon, and running is just a part of my life that keeps me sane, to say the least.
Definitely thank you for sharing. I'd say I got really good with uncertainty, especially throughout my athletic career as a pro. So I do a lot of stoic practices, and the big overarching theme with stoicism is, all right, if you can do something about a situation, do it. If you can't, don't worry about it because like, worrying is not going to make a difference. So if there's easier said than done, part of it is just going through multiple stressful situations until you get like a little number to it or build some calluses. But for the most part, if there's something I can't control, I'm relatively good about just keeping my mind out of it. Now, if you do have a bunch of energy and there is something you can do about it, you can use that nervousness or anxiety or whatever you may have as a positive and use that to fuel a pursuit or to fuel whatever changes you need to make. And that's usually how I've kind of gone about my life as of late. I can't say I was always that way, but definitely the last few years, that's been kind of my go-to, my mantra.
Okay, we also have a question from Connor. Connor, can you please go off mute and ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. My question has to do with kind of like your own personal leadership philosophy throughout the years. Who were impactful leaders that you had growing up, and or any present day ones? Because I think there's a whole difference between wanting to give back and getting involved with nonprofits and all of that, and then also taking on the task of starting your whole entirely own nonprofit. So I'm just kind of interested more to hear about kind of how you've developed your own personal leadership philosophy over the years and who you've looked up to from a leadership perspective.
So before you answer, I'm sorry, Connor, you forgot the rule. We need to know a little bit about you.
My name is Connor Bestie. I'm from South Dakota. So I went to high school with Lord's now wife. I actually just saw him this last weekend. I was a student manager for 5 years for men's and women's basketball teams, University of Nebraska, and then South Dakota State University. And then now I'm currently moving to St. Paul in about a month or so. But yeah, not currently involved in athletics, and I'm not in medicine, but love Lord and so excited to be here.
Nice. I brought my own little fan club with me today. So in terms of leadership, which I keep bringing back to athletics, just because I don't know why, it's a very easy way to kind of learn these skills, and that's at least where it came from me. Tons of my leadership skills and communication style came from football. So one of the things that we do if we're calling out a play or making some sort of adjustment on the field, it's loud. There's stuff going on in the stands. There's people you're trying to communicate with near you, and the people you don't want to hear or understand the communication. So simple things like saying the person's name or the group that you're speaking to, and then saying whatever you need to say and saying it multiple times until you get a confirmation. So any sort of communication, whether it's email or whatever, similar thing where it's like, if I don't get a reply back or a thumbs up or something, I'm not going to assume the person understood. And if they didn't, it's on me. So there's this extreme sense of ownership of, okay, if I summed something, I knew what the play was, and there was some sort of confusion, whether or not the other person should have known, I, as a leader, have to take ownership of like, okay, you know what? I should have reminded that person. I should have sent them an email right before the meeting. I should have made it especially clear. And that extreme sense of ownership is nice because if you're holding that yourself to a certain standard, other people will kind of follow by that example. So I'm definitely prone to double checking or making sure like, okay, let me send a quick reminder. Let me make sure you know where we're supposed to be at, or, describing in detail, just to doubly check or make sure if I have any confusion, we have to all be on the same page. And even if we're all on the same page, things may not work out. That's the thing. But at least I need to give myself the best chance before anything happens, before the play actually starts, to be in a good position. So communication is probably the biggest thing that I learned in terms of leadership style. And then that extreme ownership of decisions. Like if I'm making a decision, basically the glory, if we win, the glory is on everybody. If we lose, like the glory is going to be falling to the leaders. So it is what it is, but it's part of you getting to say, hey, I'm the captain of the team, or I'm the leader, I'm the co-founder. So you got to take the good with the bad. So most often, or more often than not, even in my professional life, if it's something where I mess up or somebody else mess up, but it's under my responsibility or purview, even if it's the case, I'd rather take the blame publicly, knowing that, hey, I'm the leader, I'm the face of it. And then in the background, I can deal with whatever issue, whatever miscommunication, or whatever fell apart. It's just most people outside of, special few that are used to being coached, most people don't thrive well when they're publicly criticized. It's usually better to do that in private and then, take that on your own. And people usually respect you for it because they have the idea of like, okay, this is my guy. He's going to protect me. He's not going to tear me down in public. He cares about me. And that really motivates people to do the best job that they can for you. And so tons of it's from athletics, usually from either great coaches I've had or good captains I've had. I'd say that's where a lot of my leadership skills have come from. Because you don't always get like, I don't know, maybe at a certain level in the professional sphere, you get classes and sit down, but I can say for the most part, most of my leadership skills or lessons came from the football field or the wrestling mats.
Thank you. I see Heaven has her hand up. Heaven, you could come off mute and answer your question. Let me ask you.
Yes, hi. I had another question. Basically, I wanted to know, have you always stuck to your original plan in medicine, or have you ever thought of other healthcare, professions that would get you to the goal a little faster or quicker?
So I haven't personally, and part of it is I don't know if I want to call it vainness or just like a perception of where my role is or where I stand as a Black man in America. I knew I didn't want, if I was going to be in medicine, I want to make sure like I was the good guy, like I was the dude, like I'm like the leader, I'm like in charge of whatever. Not to say that you can't deal with microaggressions or deal with racism as the leader of like a surgery center or as a leader in this capacity or that capacity. But I just want to make sure, like, okay, if I'm going to be one of the few Black men in medicine and I have the ability to take it to whatever level, like I should reach my full potential and go there, because there may not be other people around or as many other people around that can do what I could do. And just in general, when you're like a minority, there's going to be, how to put, like, if I'm one of the few, say I'm one of the few like Black neurosurgeons that you see, your perception of Black neurosurgeons may be just based off of me. So it's like, all right, cool, let me do that instead of pursuing something that I'm not as passionate about or something that I'm not as sure about just because I want to maybe cut down my training time. Like, you're going to be 30, 40, 50 regardless. Would you rather do that with something you're really, really excited about and motivated for, something you're not excited and motivated for? Now, just for me, there hasn't been any other type of care or type of healthcare career outside of maybe like, I don't know, a healthcare administrator type thing, but there hasn't been like PT hasn't been interesting to me. OT hasn't really been as interesting to me. Like respiratory therapy, being a nurse hasn't been interesting to me. PA, I like loosely contemplated once because like I see a PA for my primary care, but like I wasn't really interested in primary care. So in that aspect, it wasn't super interesting to me. And so I didn't need or want a plan B per se. It was like, okay, I had my heart set on one aspect. I felt like this would be the best way for me to affect the healthcare industry and health equity as a whole and give me the most option. And so I just kind of stuck with it. I don't know if that explained or answered the question super, super well. But for the most part, I have felt like, the autonomy and then the responsibility that you have as a leader on a healthcare team was something that fit my personality and what I'd done in the past. And so I didn't really want to deviate from that. I didn't have any personal aspiration to do anything other than that.
That was helpful. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, and this thing is something that you talked about, but it was in passing, and that we've seen as far as our swag initiative. It's important for athletes to understand that the journey is going to require some gap years between athletics and medical school. Now, that's not always the case, but the vast majority of athletes we've spoken to have done 1 or 2 gap years. It's just part of the journey.
Yeah.
You talk about when you first realized that that was going to be a part of your journey and how you embraced that gap time and what you did during that gap time.
Yeah. So the way I'll speak for Columbia, and I don't know about other situations. I'll say this in general. I'm not gonna say most, a lot of college programs, especially with football, because of how rigid the schedule is, because there's so many guys on the team that have to like fit their class schedules in certain ways. Some schools, especially the bigger schools, will only let you choose from certain majors that they know can fit your schedule. In my case, Columbia University didn't have any online classes that I could take. All the hard science classes needed not only a lecture, but a recitation where there was a quiz. And you'd spend time with like a TA. And so just based on those scheduling constraints, I knew I could only take one hard science. By hard science, I mean like biology, chemistry, physics, biochem, basically anything outside of social science, just because of the way they're timed up and the lecture hall set up at Columbia. I only take one during the season, and I could take like 2 in my spring semester in the off season. So organic chemistry was a class I planned on taking, but just before I was going to take it, I moved it from a 1 semester class to a full year class. And so since it was a full year class and I already needed to take biology, I couldn't take organic chemistry with biology. So I was like, hey, I'm going to pursue the football thing anyways first. Let me just take all the pre-med courses I can take. And then, gap years are common now. I can fill in whatever I need to fill in on the back end and take my organic chemistry class somewhere else. That had become semi-common and I'd heard of or seen other folks do it. So I just built that into my plan instead of setting myself up for failure, which have been in either trying to squeeze that in or having to deal with either missing practice time or even dealing with the rigor of 2 hardcore classes during the football season when I have less time. So it was being flexible with that, being cool with taking a gap year or 2. In my case, it was several just because I was playing pro during the time. But had I not even played pro, I'd already had a game plan. Like say I'd not gotten signed at all. I had done summer research in the lab. That attending had already lined up things, and she said, if you want to come back, you can work here for 2 years, or I think it was 3 years. And after the first year, you would be able to get an MPH for free for the next 2 years, and you'd have like your Columbia undergrad degree and then a Columbia MPH, and then you can go ahead and apply for that. And so that's like another case of a mentor that was looking out, had already mentored students that were student athletes, kind of knew what it took on the back end, just kind of like laying out a nice plan for me. Turns out I didn't end up doing the whole lab assistant public health degree route just because things worked out differently on the football end. But gap years are an invaluable experience, especially if you use them right, especially when you're crunched on time as an athlete. And to be honest, athlete or not, the majority of med students these days are taking gap years and filling them with great experiences, whether it's teaching, volunteering, doing research, and getting published before med school. I feel like there's less, or honestly, not even a stigma of taking a gap year just because there's so many benefits to it.
Thank you. We have a hand raised by Maria.
Hi, my name is Mariah. I am not a college athlete, but I work in an environment where I'm dealing with lots of people from not only different cultures and backgrounds, but also different levels of, I'm going to say communication because I think that that's like the nicest way to say that. So, Lord, you've been talking about all of the influences between your parents and your mentors and your coaches. And then you talked a little bit about like the stoic part of how you operate. Could you really like lean into how you deal with hostility, possibly people who aren't, in it for your best interest, how you navigate such a diverse like influence around you?
Definitely. That's a great question. I guess the first thing, in some ways I am, but for the most part, I've learned not to be a people pleaser. You don't need everybody to like you to like think that you're great or the best ever. Honestly, some people can be really, it can honestly be pretty rude or not like you, and it shouldn't in fact impact the performance that you have. So like if I'm in the case where like a bot that just really doesn't like me, doesn't like to hang out with me, talks behind my back, whatever, I may not be in a good situation for promotion, but if I'm producing X amount of work, whether they like me or not, they kind of got to deal with me. The best example I can give of this is in most organizations, especially, I thought this is an easy one, but this happens in all different sectors. You get an extended leash, the better of a contributor employee you are. So the guy that brings in millions of dollars of sales is all-star salesman. That guy usually is able to like come in a little later or may not have to go to all the meetings just because they're that much more valuable. So in situations like that, I definitely, as much as possible, try to lean into my productivity or whatever I bring to the table just to make sure I'm not putting myself in a situation where I could be either taken advantage of or ousted or I don't know, fired or presented in a bad way. In those situations, I make sure I'm extra on point. So even if you wanted to get rid of me, somebody would be like, oh, we can't get rid of this person. That's like the biggest contributor. This person brings so much to the table. And then for the most part, if it gets pretty bad, I try to keep things as cordial or polite as possible. Usually it takes 2 to tango. And I find that if they can't find that they're able to reciprocate their negative energy or their animosity or whatever it may be back, that kind of dwindles the fire a little bit. Not to say that I'll pacify them completely or that they'll suddenly become a nicer, better person. But if I can keep my interactions short and sweet with somebody that I know doesn't like me, keep things nice and professional, and find any excuse to get out of conversations or not work in that same environment as them, that's perfect. Or if I can keep it just to work or short and sweet, not in a rude way per se, but I find that my own mental sanity, my own like self-care is definitely more important than trying to get one up on somebody or get back at somebody. So generally speaking, that's my go-to now. Back in the day as an athlete, I usually tried to like mediate and get to the bottom of it. I had an issue with one teammate when I was in college where I think he had thought that I had done something that I hadn't done. And so we had a conversation, and rightfully so, as that had been cleared up. We never became best of friends, but like, we were on better terms. But I don't know, especially with in the adult sense now, people being passive aggressive, that's not always going to work. I figure it's worth a try, but if not, the least you can interact with somebody in that situation, the better. That's my kind of 2 cents, but that might not be the perfect answer. But that's definitely my own personal experience.
Okay, if there's not any other questions, we've been on for a while now. The last thing that I'd like to ask Lord is, how can listeners support or get involved with Sneakers to Scrubs, and whether students or educators or health professionals, what can they all do to support the Sneakers to Scrub movement?
I think the first and easiest thing is probably to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Any activities we have coming up, we try to post about. And then I think there's also a link to get signed up, whether it's you're curious about getting your kid involved in some activities or you want to volunteer. We have a nice logic to a little red, I'm forgetting what the name of it is, but we have a nice logic on a survey form. You can go ahead and put your information, describe whether you want to be like a volunteer or if you have a kid that you're interested in getting involved. And that's a great way to just stay up to date on what we're doing. We're mostly localized in the Chicagoland area. But as we slowly but surely expand, even folks that are outside of Illinois, there'll definitely be opportunities that come up.
And is there have you launched a website yet, or is just social media?
I think it's coming out this week. I know they were editing. I think there's I don't know if the page is live. I've seen like a copy of the draft, but I don't know that it's live yet per se. Yeah, and then you can follow me, I guess, if you're interested. But I think I'll eventually make like a separate page with more med school specific stuff for people that want to follow or more advice about being a med school or being a student athlete or being a pre-med student athlete. But as of now, my Instagram is probably fine because I repost all the Sneakers to Scrub stuff anyways.
Okay, so thank you so much. I will add out all your ats on the after editing thing so that everybody can have that. And we just want to say thank you for being a part of it. We're enjoying the conversations that we're having with each Sneakers to Scrub co-founder, and we look forward to our next edition next month. Everyone, please sign up and join us again. As always, I'm your host, Anthony Smalls. Everyone have a wonderful night and take care.
Lord, before you go, one quick question. You said you're from Ghana.
Yes, sir.
Are you Ashanti? Oh, what's your family?
Ashanti, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right, brother. Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye.